Wondering where we are right now with government help? Well, watch on. As a business accountant, my team and I spend all day long helping business owners on their journey. And I thought now would be a good time to update you on where we are with the COVID help. I think there was a point, particularly on the YouTube channel, where we seemed to be talking about nothing but COVID related content for ages. And then I did see in the comments somebody requesting, can we do another video updating where we are now? Well, there you go, we're here. So this one's for you, anyone else that wants to know where we are, because things have been changeable, not as fast as they were early on in coronavirus, where it just felt like all we were doing all weekend as accountants was digesting government guidance on a Friday night and then telling everyone about it ASAP over the weekend. But there has been some tweaks, and I think what we will see as this video is being recorded is very close to when the Chancellor is going to make some more announcements. So for all I know, by the time we put this video out, it's out of date anyway, but I'm fingers crossed, as of today, mid-Feb, this is where we are. Now, there will be a budget by the Chancellor on the 3rd of March. Now, if you've never really heard of a budget and it just sounds like, well, why do I care? Honestly, we do it internally. I force all the team to watch it, and I think anybody who's been around our business for a long time knows that's the day we get lunch in and we sit and watch it together, because it is really important to everybody's finances. And I think politics aside, it's important for you to know what people who are running the country are planning to do with your money and why. So definitely watch that. I mean, we break it down on our social media channels and blogs and all that kind of stuff. So there will be some broken down, easy to digest information there, but do watch it. But that's where we think most of the announcements are going to go. And when we talk through where we are with some of the things right now, the date is being given as the 3rd of March, because I think they're going to know at that date what they're going to do with some of these schemes. So let's break down what's available right now. But before we do, if you like these type of videos, make sure to click the subscribe button below so you get notified whenever we release more just like it. So we might as well start off with the word of 2020, furlough, or the Coronavirus Job Retention Scheme, as it's officially known. I think most people know it as the furlough scheme. This was there for mainly employees to fund 80% of their wages. Now, so we're talking as a small business owner's point of view here. So for limited company owners, this affects you. You can claim furlough as a director. You can either do full furlough, where you don't work, you don't do anything other than your sort of like tiny sort of duties as a director. So you might pay the odd thing from the bank or something to keep it going, but ultimately you can't do anything. And you can claim 80% of your payrolled money. Now, for most directors of a limited company, that's peanuts. You're probably paying yourself about £700-800 a month, and you're going to get 80% of that. But it will help. It's better than nothing. But in order to do full furlough and claim all that money, you can't work. But what they did introduce later down the line was something called flexible furlough, which allowed you then to work a bit, claim some furlough. So keep good records of the hours you're working and things like that to back up any part furlough claim. But ultimately, it is possible to do a bit of furlough now and a bit of work. So if you're in those really affected industries, that's a particular option. But ultimately, if you've got people working for you, obviously it's there to make sure that you can reclaim the cost of keeping them on board temporarily at 80% of their wages. It's not as amazing as it was originally, because you still will pay employers' national insurance and pension contributions where they apply. So they generally apply where you're paying somebody over about $9,500 and where you're paying somebody, say, over 10 for pensions. And those limits are completely rough, because it totally depends on the individual circumstances. But just for a feel for that kind of, if they're being paid around, 8.5 to 10 grand, those things may well apply. So bear that in mind. Now, that scheme is running currently until the 30th of April. I think payroll providers everywhere will cheer the day that furlough finally goes, because nobody's enjoyed the particular timescales and pressures involved with that one, but it has been a critical thing to get money to employers and people, and as a scheme, I think has worked quite well. There's a 14-day deadline on claiming it, so you currently can't claim anything before October 20, and everything else now has to be done within a 14-day timescale. If you do miss it, there is technically a way to claim after, but it's a bit of a process. But for now, you should know that you should be doing it within 14 days, so it's very tight timescale on that. And we're presuming there may be an announcement in the budget either extending it or tapering it off as they did before. So that's limited company directors. Let's talk about if you're self-employed. So, and I know we've talked about this a lot on the channel, but ultimately the tax people see you as a self-employed person is like a non-limited company person. So, quite often stereotypically a hairdresser, a barber, those kind of one man, one lady type businesses. And quite often when you're starting off your self-employed journey, you start off in that manner. And then as your profits grow and everything else, you might then transition into a limited. So we're talking about self-employed people. Now, they had interesting scheme with this where they paid you, what was the idea, I think, was that it was a kind of an equivalent to a furlough scheme. It was 80% of your average monthly trading profits, and they paid it in a grant. So they call it the self-employed grant, is how most people refer to it. Now, that was based on your 18-19 tax return and 3 years before. Now we're sitting in 2021. That seems like a crazy amount of time away, and there are a lot of people that really just missed it thanks to that particular timescale. And at the moment, as we're recording this video, there's been no announced changes to that. Now, there is a fourth self-employment grant that's due to come, and that covers February to April. Now, they're announcing the details on the 3rd of March in the budget, presumably because they want to keep it in line with whatever they're going to do with furlough. Now, there's some hope, people are crossing their fingers, that they might actually refer to more current tax years, because obviously we've now had the 1920 year has been filed and done, so for everybody that should have filed it. I mean, actually they extended the deadline slightly, so there will be some people right now as they're listening to this video that have still got to the 28th of February to do it. For all our clients it was all done before on the normal deadline, but for some people they've used that extension. But whatever happens, by the time we get to the 3rd of March, in theory, people should have filed their tax returns, so there may be the option. But honestly, right now it's speculation, we just don't know. But that grant will be there, and we don't know the level of the grant. I suppose it will be in line with furlough. It could be 80% of your average monthly earnings. It could be, anything else. Before they were going to taper it off, so it went down the percentages. But that will be there. It will be an automatic thing that you'll be able to go online and claim as before. Unfortunately, accountants can't claim it for you. It's very much something you have to do for your personal tax account. Very simple process. And again, there'll be more videos. There's already videos on the back ones if you want to check those out. But that's where we are with that. It's coming. Wait for the 3rd of March to find out exactly what that's going to be. Then we've got bounce back loans. Don't want to go too much into them because there's a ton of videos. But the main tweak was that recently the Chancellor came out and said, look, we've actually allowed you to take a 6-month payment break from day one. Before you could take a 6-month payment break, but you had to have paid some time first. Now they're just saying, yeah, you can extend that. So you can have that. You can also do 3 lots of 6-month interest-only periods, which would make the payments next to nothing. And you can also stretch it back over 10 years rather than 5. So bear that in mind, fantastic scheme, and it's still available to apply for. Then the other 2 things I want to talk about are local councils. So check out the local councils, be subscribed to their business newsletters, and also any enterprise groups. So like locally where we are, we have something called the Solent LEP, and they're another sort of agency that quite often get little pots of money to divvy up. Now there's a couple of main grants. One's called the Local Restrictions Grant. That's a mouthful to say. Closed. Now that's very confusing when you go on their website because you think that it means that it's not open anymore, but it's just what it's called. And that's for people that have premises and have a rateable value. So they're kind of business rate grants effectively for those that have got premises. And they range between 2 and 4.5 grand from the 5th of January for a 42-day period paid in one shot for those businesses that are required to close. So they're things like hospitality, non-essential retail that the government have said you cannot open. They're not for people that thought, oh, it just can't do it, mate. It's not for those type of businesses. So it's very much for those that are required. And then they actually released an additional grant on top of that called a closed business payment. Now that ranged from about 4 to about 9 grand, depending again where you are on that scale of rateable value. And again, this is all done through your local council, so definitely check those online. And I think if you've had business rate grants before, quite often they were just paying them out automatically from the date they had on their system. But if not, do get in contact with your local councils. So you might say, what happens if I haven't got premises, but I have got a load of fixed costs? Well, what they did is they released another one called an additional restrictions grant that was available to you, up to about £3,000 for a 28-day period. That is kind of like, I don't want to use discretionary, but you have to apply for a process and they will look at your case and issue that grant. It generally affects people that have dropped at least a third of their turnover, but you don't have to have been required to close. So you might be somebody like in the event sector that's a bit more that you haven't got a fixed place of work or anything like that, but you've obviously been unable to work. So if you're able to demonstrate you've had at least sort of a third drop in your turnover, that kind of stuff, and you've got some fixed costs, there's a list normally on the council website where they'll show you, you need to look at things. They're not necessarily talking about wages, because obviously we've got furlough and things to sort out staff, but it's for other big costs that you might have. Now, if you've got those kind of overheads as they're known, then this grant's possible to apply for, and you've had that big drop in turnover and severely been affected, that's what it's there for. And again, there's an online application form with most of the councils that will get that to you. So go on and apply for that. And then finally, as I mentioned, definitely check out local enterprise groups and just be signed up to newsletters, because there are these random pots of money that have come over during the lockdown where local council have been able to dish those out based on cases. And I've seen some bizarre ones where people have got them and you thought, okay, fine. And then you've seen some really other ones where you're like, why have they not got one? So definitely apply, because you just don't know what is available to you. If you've been severely affected, there are a few things you can do. So that's kind of where we are right now. That's the feel for all the major grants and things that are available. Obviously, there are things that keep popping up, and as they appear, we will cover them on the channel. So that's it. Hope you've enjoyed this one. And if you've got value from it, please do share it with somebody that you think would benefit, and we'll see you on the next one.